Hi there, welcome to my channel. My name is Sandra and you're watching The Schwoven's Nest. My first DIY is using this large jar or vase that came from the Dollar Tree. I had already used this in a previous project, but it was just sitting around, so it was time for a makeover. I'm using some of my DIY chalk paint that's made with talc and latex paint, and I'm going to go over this original color and I'm going to go up a little bit higher onto the vase, probably about 3/4 to the top. What I'm going to do is just give it one good coat, let it dry completely, and then follow up with a couple of other coats. Today's video is sponsored by Hiipoo. For this project, I'll be using their Waterslide decal paper. If you haven't tried it yet, I've got a link for you down in my description box. It's so easy and quick to create high-end home decor with this technique. Here is the design that I'm going to be using for this project. I printed it on the shiny side of the paper. Then I used 3 coats of matte clear finish. Sorry that the can is upside down. You can use any brand of matte clear finish. I like the Rust-Oleum brand. I just think it gives me the best coverage. What you want to do is spray it so it is totally soaked, let it dry completely, and then repeat that process 2 more times. What that's going to do is make sure that the ink doesn't bleed and that it's permanently attached to the decal paper. Now I'm just going to cut out my decal, just removing any of the white space because I don't need that extra. I didn't want my image to have a straight line at the top, so I'm just cutting a wavy line all the way across. Not perfect, just abstract. However I ended up cutting it, that's how it will be. This image is absolutely gorgeous, and you can pick this up for totally free on Pixabay.com. I will have a link for Pixabay down in my description box, and I'll have a link for this snowman picture too. Now that we're all prepped, it's time to dunk this baby in water. I had to go get one of my huge cake pans because this is a larger sheet. I usually do smaller pieces, but I did want to try a total wrap of a project. So this is lukewarm water, probably just a little bit warmer than room temperature, and you want to make sure that the whole image is immersed in the water. So you hold it there for a couple of seconds until it's not going to curl anymore, and then leave it for about 60 seconds. While you're waiting, you can go ahead and add some water to your project. That's going to help you move the decal around and replace it. Now, because I used chalk paint, it ended up being really sticky and the water didn't actually glide onto it. So I would recommend sealing your chalk paint first before putting a water slide decal on it. You're going to see here that I struggled a little bit, but I was able to get the look that I was going for. My first time trying a full wrap with this decal, I think it turned out pretty cute. Once you take your decal out of the water, you should be able to easily move it around on the paper like you just saw me do. Then place it on your project and pull the paper out. Now with this, because it's a large piece, I'm able to pick it up and reposition the whole thing. It's a little tricky working with such a large piece of the decal paper, so I think having extra water on the bottom of, and what I mean is on top of my item, because the chalk paint wasn't very good with hanging on to the water, I'm working with somewhat of a dry surface, and that kind of makes more wrinkles and bubbles. So just make sure that you're using an item that can hang on to the water a little bit underneath the decal, so you have an easier time of positioning it and getting all the bubbles and wrinkles out. Once I have it positioned as best I can, I'm just going to take a soft tissue and start pushing out some of the excess water and the bubbles. Around the edge of the decal here, I did end up taking my tissue and kind of pushing a little bit of water underneath the decal itself, just so there would be better adhesion. You can see a lot of bubbles and wrinkles in here, but you know what? I'm okay with it. My first time doing a full wrap, and I think it's all right. When I originally painted the white on the jar, I just left some of these jagged brush strokes, but then I decided I didn't like that. So I'm going to just make some waves at the top to match the waves on the decal. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just going to give it more of a smooth line, and that will actually just look like hills of snow. And lastly, to add a little bit of sparkle to this, I'm going to take some of these clear snowflakes that I picked up at my local dollar store, and I'm going to hot glue them on the line of the decal and the paint, just like you see me doing here. I'm just going to stagger them in not so much of a pattern, add some large ones and some small ones. And I think this turned out cute. Now, the one struggle that I had when I was staging this was trying to figure out what I should put in this large jar. So if you have some ideas, let me know down in the comments because I left it empty because I really wasn't quite sure what to do with it. For this project, I'm going to use a piece of drop cloth. If you're not familiar with drop cloth, go to your local hardware store. They have tons of it for really cheap. I got a 4-foot by 15-foot piece for 20 bucks. I've been using it for over a year, so it really goes a long way. This is another beautiful snowman image that I got from Pixabay. The only thing I did to it was add the Let It Snow. So I will have this as a free printable available on my website. I printed this on the Hiipoo transfer paper for dark fabric. It has a little bit of a vinyl feel on the one side and then a grid on the other side. So you want to make sure that you put it into your printer so it prints on the vinyl side or the plain white side. When you're cutting out your design, make sure your scissors are super sharp because that vinyl portion is a little tough to cut if your scissors aren't really sharp. You also want to try and get all of the white from around your image away, so that first section there, I'll be going back and cleaning that up. This is what the backside of the paper looks like. That's the grid I mentioned earlier. What I'm doing here is just taking a glue stick because I want to round my corners. So I'll just take a pencil and just kind of score out a line, and then I'll be able to make the same shape on all 4 corners. Make sure you have your iron or your press warming to about 340 degrees. You're going to need to place it on your image for about 30 seconds to be able to adhere that little piece of vinyl to your fabric. But first, you're going to peel off the backing. You have no idea how many times I have forgotten to peel off the backing and then tried to put the transfer on and it just bubbles up because there's plastic on the back of it. Anyway, make sure you peel that backing off, then place it onto your project and smooth it out. In the package from Hiipoo with the transfer paper, you get a couple of sheets of what they call grease-proof paper. And basically, this is just a non-stick, heat-resistant sheet of paper that allows you to heat it up, not get any of the vinyl on your iron or your press, and it also doesn't stick to the image. I've got this going for about 25 seconds, and it looks like I did change the temperature to 330 degrees. When you have to pick up your press or iron and move it to another spot, make sure you're lifting straight up so as not to disturb the fabric or the image. And always make sure you have a heat resistant pad underneath as well. I'd like to say a quick thank you to all of my current subscribers. I really appreciate your support. If you're new to my channel and you like what you see, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button too. I always wait a few seconds for the paper to cool and then I gently peel it off to make sure that nothing is stuck to it. And then I double check to make sure all of the edges are sealed down properly, just by lifting it up and kind of taking a look and feeling with my fingers to see that there aren't any bubbles. My original idea was to take this little guy and put him on a canvas and then wrap the drop cloth around the canvas so it would just be an unframed print that I could just embellish. But I didn't have enough drop cloth on the sides. I ended up cutting it too short. So I'm going to change my thinking. I cut the longer edges of the drop cloth off and I'm just going to hot glue the drop cloth right on top of the canvas, and then I'm going to try and embellish it. But this also didn't work out the way I wanted it to because again, I didn't have enough fabric on the sides, and to make the image centered, I had a little bit of the white canvas showing on one end. So I flipped it around and remove the canvas completely from the frame. To get the staples out, I just use my screwdriver and I very gently wedge it underneath the staple, making it pop out a little bit, and then I use my needle nose pliers to pull them out. I put one of my cutting mats underneath and I'm using a box cutter to gently score or cut the fabric and the canvas at the same time. And what this is going to do is allow me to just hold the picture down, get rid of all of the edges, and then I'm going to hot glue it. So it probably sounds like a little bit of a backwards way to do things, but this whole project has been backwards. So I'm not surprised. I'm sure there would have been an easier way to do it, but I just decided to do it this way. I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue in the corner just to hold it in place, and then I'll repeat this cutting process for the rest of the frame. Once that's completed, I'm just going to run some hot glue onto the portion of the canvas and the drop cloth that isn't glued down yet and just hold it in place until it dries. The other day when I was shopping at my local Dollarama store, I hit the jackpot and found this beautiful little sort of burlappy snowflake ribbon that was the perfect embellishment for my little snowman. So I'm going to just create a frame and hot glue the ribbon right around the edges. So you're not going to see those rounded edges anymore, but that's okay. Again, that was another thing that I kind of tried and didn't work out. If you're interested in trying the Hiipoo transfer paper for dark fabric, I've also got a link for that in my description box. The last backwards thing that I'm going to do for this project is to stain the frame with a wash of burnt umber acrylic paint and some water. I'm just going to be really careful not to get any on the fabric, and this project is done. It was a little bit of a struggle, but I think it was worth it in the long run. This project turned out great and it's super cute. I am using sublimation as the method for this. The fabric that I'm using is a large napkin that's 100% polyester, which is what is required for sublimation. You can do sublimation on cotton, but you have to treat it ahead of time because otherwise it won't last and it will wash out. The ink will wash out. What I'm doing now is just pressing this to make sure I have all the wrinkles out. This image is a combination of a few Pixabay images and some text that I created in my Cricut design space. And I put it in there because I needed to mirror it, which means I needed to flip it so it was reversed. Because when you're working with sublimation, you're going to be printing on one side of the paper, but then you're going to be flipping it over as you see me doing here and placing it face down. So you want to make sure that any text that you use is reversed before you print. The link to the Hiipoo sublimation paper will be down in my description box. You get 110 sheets in the pack. And what you've got to remember is that you can't just use a regular printer for sublimation. It has to be the Sublimation Ink, and you need to use an EcoTank printer because it's going to be dedicated to sublimation. You're not going to be able to use that ink for anything else. Right now, I am putting some heat-resistant Teflon tape to hold my design in place. And then I'm also going to be putting a piece of Teflon paper on top. And both of these products are also listed down in my description box. Again, I'm using my heat press and I've got the pad underneath. I'm just pulling it around and making sure that it's covered enough so I don't burn my desktop. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my Easy Press, place it down at 330 degrees for 60 seconds. Now, you can't use an iron for sublimation because it doesn't get hot enough. You can see here that I'm just pushing down just a little bit. It says medium pressure, so you want to just make sure that you're applying the same amount of pressure all over the image. Revealing the image that has been transferred onto the fabric is so satisfying. I really love knowing that my project turned out good. I did have a little bit of a glitch. You can see that my paper moved just a little wee bit, so I have a little bit of duplication on some of my letters, but I am so pleased with how this one turned out. I wanted to add a little bit more design around the image. So I cut out a sheet of just stars that I printed on the sublimation paper as well. And the reason I chose a star shape is because when you look really close at these little snowflakes that are on the original image, they're actually stars. So I thought that would be super cute. I'm going to just cut out all the different stars that I want, and I'm going to place some in each corner, again using the Teflon tape to hold it in place, and then using my press for the 60 seconds that's required. I'm making this into a pillow, and I wanted to do a little bit of embellishment in the corner, so I decided to create some really fun pom-poms. I watched a tutorial on YouTube, and this is how they did it, so I decided to give it a try. I'm just using one of my small paint pots as a template, and I'm going to draw out 2 circles on some thin cardstock. I need to create a donut shape, so I'm using my glue stick to draw a circle in the middle of each of the circles. Then I'm going to cut it out just by simply snipping a slit into the outer circle and then cutting the inside circle out. I'm going to place the 2 circles together, making sure that the cut line matches up. And then I'm going to cut just a little bit of a larger piece out because I need to have a little bit of space where I'm going to be putting the yarn through. Holding both of the pieces of cardboard together and then hanging on to the end of my rope, I'm going to go ahead and start twisting it around the donut shape. Now, I didn't have any yarn, so I had to use this white cotton rope, but I think it turned out pretty fun. You're going to go ahead and just keep wrapping it around all the way until you get to the other side. Not very tightly, but not too loose either. And then you're going to come back and forth a few more times until you get the thickness that you want. Now, this is just an experiment for me. I had never made pom-poms like this before, so I did make one first before showing you how to make one. Holding the donut firmly in your hand, making sure that none of the ends can come out, you're going to take your scissors, push it in between the 2 pieces of cardboard, and start snipping the yarn or rope in half. And this is what's going to create your pom-pom effect. Make sure the scissors you're using are super sharp because otherwise you're just going to end up tearing and pulling. Taking another piece of yarn, something that's a little thinner than this rope. If you're using a regular yarn thickness, then you can go ahead and use the same one as you wrapped around. I'm putting this now in between the 2 pieces of cardboard, and you can see me kind of struggling here to make sure that I don't lose any of my pieces. And then I'm going to be tying a super tight knot right in the center here. Now you can just go ahead and slide those little pieces of cardboard right out and save them for your next pom-pom. I like to give mine a good shake. And of course, with this type of rope, I'm going to have to give it a little bit of some hairstyling. So I'm going to take a wide tooth comb and very gently just start combing it to open up all of those strands. Now that I've got all of them opened up, it is time for another haircut. So I'm going to go ahead and just start trimming the pom-pom, getting it into as much of a circle as I can. Using this type of rope kind of made it a little tricky. It's really soft and it doesn't really hold its shape too much. So I ended up sort of with a half side pom-pom. It sort of was flat on the bottom, but that's okay because what I'm going to be doing with it won't require it to be really full anyway. If I haven't already mentioned it, this is going to turn into a pillow. So I took another napkin and ironed it as well. And I'm putting the two insides together. That's what I'm gluing. So this is my top piece and the bottom has the proper hem on it as well. And I just thought it would be really easy to be able to just use the hot glue right on the hem because then you're not going to see it. So I'm just going to put a bead of glue all the way from the middle towards the edge. But I'm going to leave the top two edges open because that's where I'm going to be feeding the strings of my pom-poms through. So I'm going to continue to go ahead and glue this all the way around except for the bottom because that's where I need to push in my pillow. Using the long end of the yarn that I used to tie up my pom-pom, I'm going to push that into the open corner and then put my hand in underneath the pillow or in the inside of the pillow and pull the yarn through so I can get the pom-pom right where I need it to be. I'm going to add quite a bit of hot glue to the bottom corner so I can glue the pom-pom right to the fabric. Then I'm going to fold down the front corner, put a lot of hot glue there, and then flip the pillow upside down so I can press down on the front corner too. Then I'll put the pillow in and tack it closed at the bottom just in a couple of spots with hot glue. I hope you enjoyed these DIYs today and got some inspiration to try some new techniques with Hiipoo. If you liked it, I would love for you to give me a thumbs up. That really gets me noticed on YouTube. Don't forget to click the notification bell because I've got lots more DIYs coming up for you in the future. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day. See you in the next one.